Hey there, welcome back. Another session of Three Ball Walk.
How you
Eddie,
doing?
Bob, Julio, and we're back. Saying hello, but to be honest with you, it's a week of goodbyes.
Yeah.
And some very, very sad, some very expected, some unexpected. You know, we can start with Vin Scully, Sunday afternoon. Goodbye to the Dodger Stadium crowd.
Yep.
Having a few days off, and then this weekend he'll be in San Francisco broadcasting his last 3 days.
3 games. Yeah, you know, I've said this before on the show. One of the benefits of YouTube is you're able to go back and listen to old-time baseball or watch old-time baseball. Red Barber, Ernie Harwell, Harry Carey, Kurt Gowdy, Jack Buck, Bob Prince. But I think the gold standard by far is Vin Scully. I think the way he was able to take a blank canvas and paint it in a way that drew you in, and you felt like you knew him. You know, Vin Scully, for me, I first heard him on CBS as a golf announcer because I grew up here. And we had the Braves, it was Milo Hamilton, Ernie Johnson.
Yeah.
So I didn't hear Vin Scully do baseball until I was in my mid-20s. I heard him do football before I heard him do baseball because he did the CBS broadcast with Joe Montana to Dwight Clark to win the game. So when I finally heard him do baseball, oh man, this
you know, it's interesting, Eddie, and something if you've really thought about it. In those days, it was radio. And in doing radio, you had to paint the canvas.
Yep.
You literally had to create the image so the people in their minds could see what you were seeing, and you're trying to relate it so they can see the same thing.
Yep.
And then when television came along, it almost became, don't overtalk this, don't let people can see it, don't do it. And one of the most
Somebody probably needs to tell that to Tim McCarver.
Correct.
He's gone now. So
And it's interesting, and he does. But on the other hand, Vin Scully is the only person, I want to say, in the last 20 years that does television as if he's doing radio.
Yeah, I think that's true. And whenever you listen to him do a game, you're reminded of that. If you're not, if you grew up in a time when you actually listened to games on radio, then you have that experience. And I think so many younger viewers and younger people who listen and watch the game have never really just listened to a baseball game. And there's something about it. I know if you're younger, you probably say, "Oh, you're a bunch of old guys," whatever. But I'm telling you, there's something very nostalgic about just listening to a baseball game for 9 innings and listening to good announcer unfold.
But nowadays, it's not this.
No, they don't. They try to fill every second, and they try to fill every moment with some kind of stat or other kind of description. And Vin Scully was great, and the old guys were great about describing the feeling of baseball.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, and I was just going to say, and you can go, and you mentioned Tim McCarver, and it upsets you, and yet when Vinny was doing that, it didn't bother you at all.
One of the great things on YouTube, like I said before, is there's a game from '57 when the Brooklyn Dodgers are playing the Cubs. And you can go back, the whole game's on there. Koufax pitches. It's one of his best games, probably his best game of the whole year back then. But the way there's still plenty of seats here at the ballpark. Come on out if you're in the neighborhood. I mean, that kind of thing, you don't hear that today. And the other thing I think that's different today, he was 21 when he got in the booth with Red Barber and Connie Desmond. There's no major league team today that's going to give a 21-year-old kid a chance like that. He's been there for 67 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and to hear him the other night, he's a little slower in his cadence. He's a little slower, but he's still sharp, and he can make anything sound. I mean, he could talk about lunch meat.
Well, you saw when he read the grocery list. Yeah. That is one. They asked him to describe They asked him to describe what he gets when you go to the grocery store, and he described his entire grocery list and made it sound like the most exciting thing in the world.
Well, yeah, I think that's a gift, and I think that the problem is, as we've said, once TV came around, it became not a gift of description. It became a personality-driven market, and so you have faces, and you have the personalities that you needed to have in order jump off the screen. And plus you have, a little bit of a more aggressive, jumbled market than you had when those guys first came on. Because if you were a Dodger fan, you listened to Dodger radio,
Right.
and Vin Scully was the guy, and so you didn't worry. That was the only way you could see the game.
Yeah.
You couldn't go on TV and get it. You couldn't get it from Major League Baseball. You couldn't get it from anywhere else. You got it from the one market, from the one radio station in your market. If you were lucky enough to be close to them, that you could get the game.
Yep.
And so that's the way you learn to. You grew up with that voice, not only being the voice of the Dodgers, but it became the voice of your Dodgers,
Right.
your team.
Right.
And
Go ahead.
no,
Well, I was just going to say the one thing that you see broadcasters today, I think, do less of that Vin Scully or Harry Carey or any of the great old time announcers did. He knows when to be quiet. He knows when to let the crowd roar or let the pictures speak for themselves on television. And he's a different person. The one thing I think about broadcasting today, baseball announcers for the most part, in my opinion, it's visualized completely. There's nobody who has any kind of real personality. Even Joe Buck. I mean, it's just, here's the game. We're describing it. I don't want to say anything controversial, but Vin Scully or any of those old guys, they wouldn't have jobs today. I mean, I don't think.
no, and it was interesting. One of the things I remember when I was with the Dodgers, one of the big things was the argument, I guess, or I don't want to call it a fight, but the discussions on contract rights to Vin between the radio rights holders and the TV.
Oh,
and
wow.
Vinny was doing television.
Yeah.
And he had been doing radio for years and years. And Rick Monday was one of the radio broadcasters, and basically Vinny did 3 innings of television, and then in the 4th and 5th innings, there was no one in the radio booth, and they basically mic'd in the television broadcast.
Simulcast.
So they simulcast the television just so the radio could have Vinny on it. And I thought I had never seen that. And a lot of times, well, he talks too much for, you say let the audience or whatever. He talks too much for television. Well, guess what? He was talking too much on television because he was doing radio at the same time, which no one has ever done.
Well,
I mean, that's just something that doesn't happen.
YouTube things to go here is as they do a thing with there's 3 different calls of Henry Aaron's 7 or 15th home run, and they have Scully on there, and all 3 are different: Kurt Gowdy, Milo Hamilton, and Scully. And it's just cool to hear all 3 of those guys and the different approach they take, and how Scully just, there's a drive to left field, and then it's just quiet, and you just hear the crowd. And then he comes back around and describes what's going on. I got to tell one story. It's a personal story. I know you worked with him for 2 years. I mean, what was it like to work with him?
Well, I think it's come out a lot, and people have always known it, but it's interesting. Things that you always see and things that sometimes people have to point them out to you before you actually recognize them. But the one thing I remember, and especially over this past week, but I remember the most about Vin Scully was his humbleness. He is one of the most humble, God-thankful men, in a way, for the gift and the talent. And it's just me. The story is not about me. And Vinny would show up at the ballpark about 3 o'clock every afternoon, and about 3:30 is when the players go down and whatnot. And I've got to leave my office to go down for batting practice, and Davey Johnson was our manager then, and Davey would meet with the media, and I had to go down there. So before I went down at 3:30, Vinny would walk into my office every day at about 3:05, 3:10, and sit down in front of me and say, what in his voice, and you do it better, what do we have today?
Yep.
And Gary Sheffield's got he goes 16-game hit streak, and he'd get the notes and he'd circle that and highlight it and everything. I said, 14 of the 16 games he's got his extra base hit in, so it's a pretty impressive hit streak. He's got 35 total bases in those 16 games, and he'd write that, and he goes, oh, and he would make you feel like you knew everything and you were giving it to him, and he was just there when darn well he knew everything. He knew everything, but he would, and that's how he was just a transmitter of information, whether it was on the field or whether it was something the sports information department was giving him, or whatever it was, and he makes the players feel that way, and he even made the PR people feel that way.
I think that's what makes the great announcers of the game attached to their fan bases, is because the fans feel like that those announcers, Harry Carey and Vin Scully, that they not only wanted to broadcast the game, but that they were fans of the team they're broadcasting.
Yeah. Sure.
And so much now is being taught for broadcasters to be neutral, to not be a homer. I mean, that's a bad thing to be called a homer these days as a radio TV broadcaster. And for me, that's stupid. The team that's paying you is the team that is paying you.
Completely.
And so your fans that are listening to your TV things, unless you're a national, now if you're a national guy, maybe that's different. But if you're doing regional broadcasts and you're the guy for that team, then I think you ought to have some ownership of that team, and that you ought to be the guy who's trying to make everybody look in the good light. And like then you ought to be going to your PR guys and saying, what do I need to talk about to make us look better in the marketplace where I am? Because if the team does better, you do better. If you do better, you get to market yourself better. You make more money. The team makes more money. It's all around good for you if you make the team look better. But I think so many guys now want to be the journalist that they just, they either do it flat or they're even antagonistic. God, I can't believe that the pitcher's still out there in the 7th inning. Or, I can't believe he's yanking him in the 9th if you're a Marlins manager. Which probably should say that if you're the Marlins guy. But I think those kind of things happen. Like with Harry Carey, I mean, I would go and watch the Cubs, and I wasn't even a Cub fan, but I would watch the Cubs every day because Harry Carey was on there. And you never knew what Harry Carey was going to say. And, if you were a hot dog, would you eat yourself? I don't know. I'd slather myself in mustard.
Well, I remember, like, when the transistor radio age, we could pick up some Detroit games. I remember listening to Ernie Harwell as a little kid. And, wow, and just how great he was. I got to tell one story before we're done. Is when I was in college at RUF, my phone's ringing. We went down to Lakeland.
Vin Scully calling now.
Vin Scully calling out to Lakeland to do a preview of the Dodgers and Tigers. And we're interviewing Sparky Anderson and all these people. And there's a guy at the batting cage with red hair and a windbreaker on. His Vin Scully. And my heart is beating in my neck. I walked up to him. I go, Mr. Scully, my name is Bob Smith. I'm with WRUF Sports in Gainesville. I'm going to ask a couple questions about Dodgers. Bob, what do you want to know? And for like 10 minutes, we talk. He looks at his watch. I go, here comes the blow-off. Right? And then he goes, Bob, tell you what, I have to go up to the booth and do the game with Don. How'd you come up in the booth and hear me do a couple innings? I'm like, are you kidding? He's like, yes, we go up in the, who's Don? I'm from Florida. Don Knotts. I mean, who's up in the bullpen? I'm up in the
Don Drysdale?
Don Drysdale. And I'm like, you're Don Drysdale. And for 7 innings, I sat there and watched him and listened to them. And they just, he's moving papers around and making little notes, make it look so easy. But in between innings, they're talking to me. He didn't have to do that. Who am I? I'm just some kid in college who was trying to get some tape so I could do some broadcasts later. But he was so nice to me. And that is
That's who it is, and what we're learning this week, and we said when we greeted you that it was a week of goodbyes, that a lot of these people we're saying goodbye to are just downright good people.
Good people.
They're great broadcasters.
Yeah.
They're great baseball players, and that's what hurts, and that's why it's sad to see him go.
His comment of what he wanted to do when he left has been incredible. He's like, I'm just going to try to live. He said, most guys retire at 60.
Years.
They got a lot of life left ahead of them. He said, I'm retiring at 87. I just want to live. I'm just going to do my best to live and be with my wife and my family and my grandkids and my great-grandkids. And I thought, that's the way a guy ought to go out. A guy ought to go out when he's ready, when he wants to, and he's still, to me, at the top of the game, top of the heap.
Yep.
Another goodbye. Next time it's going to be a sad one when we come back after the break, and we'll talk about Jose Fernandez and his leaving us from the baseball picture as well.
Card show in Jacksonville this weekend in Mandarin at the Ramada Inn, 9 to 3. Come by and see us, and mention the show.
All right, we'll see you there. Bob will see you there. I thought they weren't going to be in Mandarin, but that's a story for a different time. All right, see you.
They're in Mandarin. That's where they are.